My entire family blocked me after my wife divorced me, but everything changed the day I made the news for my company's success with my new family. Now, they constantly show up at my office, accusing me of giving up on reaching out and claiming I owe them everything. I had to kick them out, so there's a lot to unpack. I'm currently 44, male, and married for 10 years to my wife, 41, and we're happy. However, this isn't my first marriage. I got married at 22, but that ended in divorce after 3 years, and I still don't know why. My ex-wife, let's call her Amy, was my childhood sweetheart. After college, we married, and things were fine initially, but then it got strange. I tried hard to keep the spark alive, but she seemed uninterested. Just weeks before our 3rd anniversary, she handed me divorce papers and said she was done. I wanted to save our marriage. I just needed a reason for her to give up after all those years. But she couldn't provide one. She simply said she no longer loved me. I was really upset, but felt I had no choice but to go through with the divorce. I didn't want to make her more unhappy by forcing her to stay, and since we didn't have many joint assets, the process was straightforward. Afterward, I didn't see her again. I heard from friends that she moved cities and cut ties with everyone, which was expected. What was strange, though, was that my family also stopped speaking to me around the same time. They should have supported me during such a difficult period, but instead, they distanced themselves. I tried hard to keep in touch, but I realized I had been blocked everywhere. I even attempted to visit, but my parents and sister never answered the door. It felt very strange, and it hit me hard during an already tough time. For a couple of years, I struggled to get back on my feet, even quitting my job and staying unemployed for months. Thankfully, I had friends who motivated me to move on. My family wasn't there for me, but my friends stepped in, and eventually I decided to pursue my dream of opening a restaurant. I had always wanted to do it, but had waited to save enough money, thinking of Amy while we were married. Now that we were divorced, I felt it was finally time. I decided to move forward on my own and use the name my parents suggested for the restaurant. With help from my friends, I reached out to a few investors, built a business model, and within a few years opened my first restaurant. It took almost 4 years to get back on my feet after the divorce, and 2 years later, I met my wife at a party through friends. She told me she loved my restaurant, which sparked our conversation. After 3 years of dating, I took a leap of faith and asked her to marry me. Now, 10 years later, we have a son together. My personal life has flourished alongside my professional life. I started with that one restaurant, and we gradually expanded. Now, I'm the CEO of my own hospitality group, which owns a semi-popular chain of restaurants and hotels with plans to expand beyond our state. It's been an uphill battle, but I've worked hard to get here. When I was recently asked to do an interview, I thought it was a sign that I had truly made it, so I agreed. I had no idea it would stir up a storm in my life. After watching the interview on a moderately popular news channel, my family decided to reach out to me. I really hadn't expected my family to watch the interview, and even if they did, I didn't anticipate them showing up at my office. My workplace isn't exactly a secret, so it must have been easy for them to find me. Still, it felt inappropriate for them to show up unannounced and demand to see me during work hours. Unfortunately, 3 days ago, that's exactly what happened. It was surreal to see them after so long. When the receptionist informed me that my family was waiting outside, I initially thought it was my wife and son, which would have been odd since my wife was at work and my son was at school. But then she clarified that it was my parents and sister. That's when I started to struggle with what was happening. I asked the receptionist to tell them to leave for now, but they refused and started throwing a tantrum. I didn't want security to kick them out before I had a chance to understand what was going on, so I went to the lobby. As soon as they saw me, they acted like nothing had changed since we last saw each other almost 20 years ago. They immediately began fawning over me, praising my success and how inspiring my story was. It felt very strange to hear them praise my success, especially since they should have been part of that story. I kept trying to brush it off, saying I needed to get back to work, but then they brought up my wife and son. There was a part in my interview where I talked about them and how supportive they'd been, and the channel had shown some family photos. I guess that's what they were referring to. They expressed a strong desire to meet my wife. Then, they started saying I hadn't made enough effort to stay in touch after the divorce and should have tried harder. That made me realize I might finally learn what had really happened back then, so I decided to let them talk instead of sending them away. I took a seat in the lobby with them, hoping to get closure. As they spoke, I discovered the truth about Amy's decision to divorce me and why my family had abandoned me. You might have guessed it already, but yes, Amy had been cheating on me and I had no clue. My parents had been helping her cover it up all along. Don't judge them too quickly, though. They claimed to have their reasons, which they believed were valid. Apparently, the person Amy was having an affair with was my cousin. My dad's older brother's son, let's call him Carl, was the one involved with Amy. When they finally revealed that, everything clicked into place. I understood why they had helped her, why I hadn't been invited to any family events for the past 20 years, and why I had been completely sidelined, despite being innocent in all this. Carl was spoiled and entitled, and I had always disliked him. Because his mother died when he was just 6 months old, the family gave him a free pass for everything he did. No one ever taught him how to behave, and he got away with everything. It didn't help that my uncle was my dad's boss. They started the family business together, and my dad joined later. When Carl decided he wanted to be with Amy, and she felt the same way, my family felt they had no choice but to support them to avoid my uncle's wrath. Sacrificing our relationship was easy for them. They told me that after the divorce, my uncle made it clear he didn't want anyone in the family to have contact with me, including my parents and sister. They tried to protest, but then Amy announced she was pregnant with my child. If they wanted to have any relationship with their grandkid, they had to cut me off. What struck me was that I was never informed about Amy's pregnancy when she filed for divorce, and at the time, she hadn't even been showing. I couldn't have guessed, especially since Amy had moved out long before the divorce was finalized. I had no idea I had become a father before my son was born. Apparently, I also have a daughter who's almost 20, and she thinks Carl is her real father. This was a lot to take in, and I could hardly process it. It felt like a story that I had to pinch myself to believe was my reality. My family had cut me off to maintain a relationship with their grandchild and protect their job security. But in my eyes, they were just cowards. They could have come to me with the truth and let me handle it, but they chose to be afraid of my uncle, as if he could harm them beyond firing my dad. Even then, my dad could have retaliated with a lawsuit. As for never telling me about Amy's pregnancy and my daughter, I couldn't find any excuse for that. For 20 years, they sat on this information and never spoke up until they saw I was doing well in life. Now, suddenly, they were remorseful and wanted to make it up to me. Unfortunately for them, I saw right through their act. Once they finished explaining, I told them I needed them to leave. I couldn't find it in me to forgive them at that moment. I tried to remain civil since we were in the lobby of my workplace and didn't want to create a scene, but I couldn't count on them to act the same way. When I said I wanted them to leave, they immediately started whining, saying I needed to consider their perspective and how difficult this situation had been for them too. I pointed out that they had only reached out because of my success and wanted a piece of it. They denied it vehemently, with my sister even claiming I owed my success to them, implying that I should credit them for suggesting the name for my restaurant when it was still just a dream. I found it incredibly bold of her to make such a claim, especially since they hadn't supported me at all over the years. I built everything on my own, with help from friends. Not them. Just suggesting a name didn't make them deserving of any credit for my success. It was such a ridiculous idea that I laughed at her. I told her that if they didn't leave immediately, I would have security throw them out. They quickly started arguing with me, insisting they weren't going anywhere until we cleared the air. But honestly, I was uninterested in their apologies, so I did exactly what I said I would. I had them thrown out by security. They were understandably upset, trying to claim they had no choice, but I didn't buy it. They had a choice. They just made the wrong one, and now they had to face the consequences. It hasn't been difficult for them to live without seeing me for the past 20 years, so I'm sure they can manage it in the future. It's been 3 days since then, and they haven't stopped trying to contact me. They've been texting me on social media, sending emails to my work address, and even showing up at my office, though they haven't had the guts to come inside. There's been a noticeable shift in their attitude. Now all they send are apologies. Even when I see them waiting outside, they look really upset, hoping I'll stop, but I just drive by and ignore them. It's gotten to the point where I almost feel bad for them. I've talked to my wife about this situation because, regardless of what I decide regarding my family, we need to consider my daughter, who I only learned about a couple of days ago. We've been going back and forth on whether we should try to trace her and reach out. On top of that, we have to deal with my family, who I don't think will go away until they get another chance to speak to me. My wife thinks that for the sake of at least attempting to clear things up, we should consider it. Maybe I should just speak to them, invite them over, and let us all talk it out to clear the toxicity, as it's not good for my emotional health. But honestly, I have no interest in doing that. I just want to keep ignoring them until they go away on their own. I simply don't have the capacity to deal with them right now, especially after everything I've discovered. Update. It's been a week and 3 days since I posted here. My wife and I have decided to continue ignoring my family. Thankfully, they haven't shown up at my workplace in the past couple of days. Maybe they got tired of it or intimidated by security. Regardless, I'm relieved. Once they stopped showing up, I found it much easier to stop thinking about them. I guess it was just their presence that was making me feel bad about everything. Now, I don't feel guilty about ignoring their messages anymore. They can keep apologizing. I'm moving on. All they want is forgiveness, but that's not going to change anything. The fact is, they've failed me as a family, and no amount of apologizing will make that right. They've continued sending messages from various accounts and email addresses, but I'm not even bothering to block them anymore. What's the point? They'll just create new ones to keep trying, and I'll keep ignoring it all. Let's see how long they can maintain this act of remorse. Moving on to another issue, my wife and I are uncertain about how to approach the situation with my daughter. We have her full name and know where she goes to college, thanks to my parents sharing that during our conversation. My assistant even found her social media accounts for me, but I haven't done anything yet. I don't know if it's appropriate to reach out or how to tell her I'm her biological father. She's not a minor, so I can't just show up at Amy's house demanding custody. Honestly, I'd rather not involve her in this drama at all, especially after everything I learned about her mother. I have completely lost respect for that woman and my entire family. They're just a bunch of spineless cowards, and I want nothing to do with them. However, I can't say the same for my daughter. No matter who raised her, she's still my child. If anyone has advice on how to talk to her about this, or if I even should, please let me know. Also, thanks to everyone who responded to my original post. It was really helpful. I'm hoping you can assist me again. Update. After reading through the comments from my post 3 days ago, my wife and I decided to go ahead with it. Waiting for the right time didn't make sense anymore, so we just ripped off the Band-Aid. Since my daughter lives in another state, we didn't think flying out was the best idea, so we reached out via Instagram. We explained everything as kindly as we could, and now we're waiting for her response. I know it's going to be hard for her to process. It's difficult for me too. I honestly don't know how my wife has been so supportive, knowing I'm reconnecting with a daughter I had with my ex-wife. It's a mix of complicated emotions for all of us, but we're doing our best. I just hope my daughter replies, as I would love to have a relationship with her. As for my parents, they haven't shown up at my workplace in a while. Yesterday, they sent a long email apologizing for everything and expressing a genuine desire to repair our relationship. They said they wouldn't reach out again and would wait for me to contact them instead. Honestly, I'm relieved they took the hint and realized I don't want to speak to them right now. I have a lot on my plate, and the last thing I need is more drama. I just hope they stick to their word and don't reach out again. If I feel ready or want to talk, I'll do so myself, but right now, that seems unlikely. Knowing the real reason they cut me off has left me feeling hurt and betrayed, and I don't think those feelings will go away anytime soon. At least something good came from this. I found out about my daughter. I really hope she's open to building a relationship with me. I haven't told my son about her yet, just in case she doesn't want to connect. I wouldn't want to give him false hope. But if things go well, he could gain a sister, and I might finally get to know the daughter I never knew I had. I'm just overwhelmed with emotions right now, and I'm trying hard to keep it all together. Update 3. Hi everyone. Almost 2 weeks ago, I reached out to my daughter on social media, explaining who I was and how we were related. After waiting for 2 weeks, I finally received a response today. She didn't say much, just that she spoke to her mother about me after reading my message. It was a shock for her to learn that I'm her biological father, as she had believed Carl was her dad for the past 20 years. She also discovered the real story behind our situation and expressed her desire to meet me and my family. We're all flying out to see her this weekend since she's currently not speaking to her family and doesn't have the funds to visit us. She didn't go into details, but when she confronted Amy about my message, Amy initially tried to deny it before eventually revealing the truth. I haven't heard from Amy yet, and I really hope she doesn't reach out to me because I don't want to engage with her. Meanwhile, my family broke their promise almost immediately. They started trying to contact me as soon as they learned I had reached out to my daughter. Apparently, my uncle is furious that I found out the truth and is blaming my parents for everything. They've spent years trying to keep this under wraps, and now that I know, it's causing chaos in their lives. My dad doesn't even work for my uncle anymore. He's running his own independent business, yet he's still terrified of his older brother and has been begging me to tell my uncle or Carl that they had nothing to do with this, that I found out on my own. Honestly, even if I did that, I doubt anyone would believe it. They're the only ones who would have a motive to keep this a secret, especially since I haven't been close to most of my family and they've ignored me for the past 20 years. It's funny how desperate they're acting now to maintain their relationship with my uncle. But frankly, I don't care. It's because of them that I missed out on a relationship with my daughter. Update 4. Hello, everyone. Today, my family and I finally met my daughter. It was a bit weird at first, but then it turned really emotional and beautiful. She seems to be a genuinely kind person, which is surprising given who raised her. I guess they did something right. Or maybe it's just her own nature. Either way, she's incredibly intelligent and mature. We had a long conversation about her situation with Amy and Carl. She told me that they're not on board with her meeting us, but she doesn't care. After learning the truth, she felt it was important to connect with her real family. She really didn't care what her parents thought. Since she's their only child, she doesn't feel like she's abandoning them forever. But she plans to distance herself for a while to process everything. She mentioned needing time to start building a relationship with me, and I totally understand. Overall, we had a wonderful time together, and she seemed to really connect with my wife and her half-brother. During dinner, we discovered that my parents had been in touch with her all along. She always found it strange how emotional they were about her, given that they're technically not her real grandparents, but rather her grandfather's brother's family. Now it makes sense why they felt so attached. However, after everything she learned, she sees them, and me, in a different light, just as I do with them. I can't fully grasp what she's going through since I'm older, but I know it must be incredibly difficult for her to reconcile being lied to her whole life by those she trusted most. We both have a lot of work ahead, but I'm hopeful for the future. What matters is that after so many years, we finally have a chance to make things right. I'm determined to make the most of that opportunity. I'm genuinely happy with how the meeting went, and my family seems content too. Regardless of what's happened, this feels like a fresh start, and I'm ready to embrace it.